God bless everybody. Today it's September 17th of 2026, and I wanted to do this video before we get to the month of Nisan, which actually starts on the eve of March 18th going into the 19th, especially with all the different events that are occurring in the Middle East surrounding Israel, Turkey, and Iran, as all this is ramping up in the last few weeks, and we're watching oil prices and everything spike at this moment in time, and possibly a meltdown in the next few weeks as we realize this might be a protracted war as we move forward. But I also realized that there's a date stamp that reflects Nisan 1 of this year and could show us possibly even the entrance date of Turkey as we move forward into this conflict, because I keep saying if you're in this Shemitah cycle, there's a beast system that has to radiate through the second half of it, which would start around the end of March. And so I wanted to go through these different things, and this date stamp would reflect, based on Ezekiel 26, what is supposed to happen next as we move forward in time. So I wanted to bring this to your attention. So in my opinion, based on my analysis, I believe that Ezekiel 26 is now, at this very moment in time, and I want to explain exactly why I believe that. And that is based on this date stamp in the very first verse here, and what's going on in the world, and what he's telling us as we move through this chapter. So let's look at this, and I'm going to explain to you why this might be affecting us as we move forward in the next couple of days as we go into Nisan 1, which is on March 18th, going into the 19th of this month. But before we go into Ezekiel 26, I have to explain how 4 leaders of today reflect 4 leaders of the past in the time and position that they were in place. Okay, this is extremely important that we understand. Based on my analysis, everything that I've been showing you for the last few years, you have a paradigm that's literally playing out from past to future, that's going to show you what's getting ready to happen as we move forward right now. This paradigm 2030 chart that I've been showing you for the last few years is a real-time chart that's actually been playing out for the last 3.5 years. It has all kinds of information on it. The question is it going to play out the next 3.5 years to the end of the Shemitah cycle in September of 2029? This chart includes real-time events that are happening right now that meld in with the paradigm date stamps, the Shemitah cycle, the strong generation of the Jews, and all these different elements that you have to take into consideration to understand where you are in time biblically. When you get into the paradigm 2030 date stamps that I provided, that's because 4 leaders of the past reflect 4 leaders of today, exactly in the position and time and place that they are. And you can see them here. Zedekiah reflects Reuven Rivlin in the exact time and position he was in place in the past. He reflects it in the future today. Isaac Herzog reflects the Israeli president Jehoiakim in the exact time and position he was in place. Nebuchadnezzar reflects Erdogan, which we've been talking about Turkey forever on this channel, and how he is going to be the white horseman that brings a quarter of the world into war and then dies on a 6th seal, is resurrected into an antichrist on the 6th trumpet event. Then, after working on this chart for almost 10 years, I found that in the last 1.5 years or so, We have a new leader that reflects Darius the Mede in the new Kurdish leader that came in October 20th of 2024. So now you literally have four leaders of the past, four kings that reflect major components of the Bible, that reflect leaders of today that can be isolated down in the position and time that they were in place, because it reflects the paradigm date stamps that I'm getting ready to show you now. So I probably have close to a couple dozen different date stamps on this Paradigm 2030 chart that we'll go into in a little bit here. But what I wanted to explain to you is, if these are truly kings of the past that reflect kings of the future, then we can take these date stamps and extrapolate them down to show you what might literally be coming at this moment in time. You cannot use the Gregorian calendars when you do this, though. I started doing it like that and it was off a little. Once I moved it to the Hebrew calendars, these dates have been almost spot on. So I wanted to show you how this works again, because it's extremely important that you can actually generate these dates yourself and understand how this Bible works by looking at the past kings to the future, where you are today and the current events that are happening, what's going to happen next. So when we look at Ezekiel 26, he says something extremely important here. He actually says a lot here in Ezekiel 26, and all this is reflecting you at this moment in time. So he talks about it came to pass in the 11th year. So if you look at the 11th year of Zedekiah, Zedekiah reflects Reuven Rivlin today, in past, in the time and position. So look at how this works. Reuven Rivlin came in as president in July 24th of 2014 and then left in July 7th of 2021, and then we saw Isaac Herzog come in from July 7th of 2021 and is still the president at this moment in time. But look at the date that he came in, this guy named Reuven Rivlin. He came in July 24th of 2014. So when you go to his 11th year, that would be July 24th of 2025. So his 11th year would radiate between July 24th of 2025 and July 24th of 2026. I'm going to tell you up front, I made a mistake on the paradigm chart, because I actually had this date in 2025 on 1 Nisan, and it should be on Nisan 1 of 2026 if you're adjusting it properly to the year of this king. So I originally had this date as a 25 date. And then when I went back in just the last day or so, I realized we were getting to Nisan 1, and I had a Nisan 1 date on the chart. I need to go back and look at it because it seemed to reflect now more than it did last year. So when I went back and looked at it, I realized I had made a mistake, and I'll be the first one when I make a mistake to tell you that I'm going to adjust this and exactly why I'm adjusting it, because I want to make this chart as proper and correct as possible. So on this chart, which was in my last video or so, because I've not updated my charts lately, I've tried to explain to you that I'm waiting to see how this plays out, because the paradigm has been playing out and I have been updating it in real time. Actually, I think I updated on March 1st, but I'm going to re-update it, so don't even go look at that one. We'll just look at this one and I'll show you how this is adjusted. So I originally had this on November 8th of 2025, and when you go in and you blow this up approximately in this area, I'll show you that area now. So I brought this up so you can see exactly where we were in the chart on November 8th, okay? And I've left these areas here so you can sort of follow where they are, so they give you some markers on the chart to see where you are located in the chart, because the chart's extensive and there's a lot of information here. When you get to this date of March 30th, which was Nisan 1 of 2025, I had this original marker, but I didn't realize I had the year wrong based on the king, and I had calculated it improperly. So look at this. This is extremely important. Don't just turn me off now, because I'm telling you, Turkey's getting ready to walk in the room, maybe in the next couple days, based on Ezekiel 26. You're going through this prophecy right now, but I want to show you how this works, because you need to understand that this is happening to you at this moment in time. So look at Ezekiel 26 and this date stamp I had. March 30th of 2025, which should be actually Nisan 1, March 18th of 2026, because it moves around the Jewish calendar based on the Gregorian date. It states this: Ezekiel has a vision on Nisan 1. I'm going to show you that verse in Ezekiel 26 again, indicating Turkey would start to move troops into Syria for an invasion and a beginning of a siege of Tyre, Lebanon by July or June or July. The reason this is here by June or July is because that's when Tyre, Lebanon was attacked in the history books. It was starting in July. But if you go back, you realize that it was already being attacked in July of 25. You can go back and look at those reports. And that's what sort of confused me, because we were having these attacks literally occurring in July of last year on Lebanon. So in 2025, in July, we started to see these escalations of Hezbollah fighters against the Lebanese government, and how they weren't going to disarm, and we've been having this issue since. And we actually saw reported ground activity between Israel and Hezbollah around July 9th. So I thought, wow, it seemed right. But then when I went back and I actually looked at the date stamp and the year of that king, I realized I had made a critical error, and it's actually radiating to this year on Nisan 1. So I am in the process of adjusting the chart right now. I will update it once I get that done, but I have a number of different elements I have to verify and make sure I get them all right, so that I have the most proper chart I can have out here. But look at these date stamp and look at what this judgment or event that's going to occur is bringing forward on this very specific date. So when you go to Reuven Rivlin on his 11th year, first day of the month, we're talking Nisan 1, first day of the calendar year in the 11th year of Zedekiah. So each of these leaders have multiple date stamps built into that paradigm chart. Right now we're going to concentrate on Zedekiah and Reuven Rivlin, because he's the one that reflects this Ezekiel 26 prophecy. Look at the date stamps. July 24th to 2014, his 11th year. If you're taking it from past to future, his 11th year today would be July 24th of 2025 to July 24th of 2026. So that would reflect the 11th year. That would reflect 2026 now. If you look at the first day of the month of the new Jewish calendar, which would be Nisan 1, that would be March 18th going into the 19th. So when you go into the Jewish calendars and you actually look at Nisan 1, you'll realize that happens on March 19th. So if you go back to the prophecy, now that we've isolated the date based on the king of past to future and the day and month that he's talking about in the Bible, this prophecy in Ezekiel 26 talks about this judgment against Tyrus or Tyre, Lebanon, and how they've not been a good steward to Jerusalem. She is broken. That was the gates of the people. She is turned unto me. I shall be replenished. Now she is laid waste. So he's going to get ready to totally waste Tyre, Lebanon. It tells you how bad this is going to be as we move forward. It states in verse 3, "Therefore thus saith the Lord God, Behold, I am against thee, O Tyrus," or Tyre, "and will cause many nations to come against thee, as the sea causeth his wave to come up. And they shall destroy the walls of Tyrus. They will break down her towers. I will also scrape her dust from her and make her like the top of a rock." So like cleansed. There won't be hardly anything left of it. There won't be anything hardly standing on top of each other. Like it sort of says in Damascus, there won't be anything left of it. It'll just be like a flat rock by the time he's done with this. "It shall be a place for spreading of nets in the midst of the sea, for I have spoken it, saith the Lord God, and it shall become a spoil to the nations." Now listen to what he says in the next couple verses here, because this is going to set up where I believe this is going to take us next and bring Turkey in the room. "And her daughters which are in the field shall be slain by the sword, and they shall know that I am the Lord." And this 7th verse, I believe, says it all. "Thus saith the Lord God, Behold, I will bring upon Tyrus," or Tyre, "Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, king of kings, from the north, with horses, with chariots, and with horsemen, companies, and much people." Now, you have to understand what's going on in Lebanon at this moment in time to understand that this next verse is what's getting ready to happen. He's going to place a sword against the daughters in the field. He's going to siege this city. He's going to mount an attack from Nebuchadnezzar, which is Erdogan, which is from Turkey, which is going to happen starting around Nisan 1 of 2026, based on Zedekiah, the king of the past, to Reuven Rivlin today in the years that he's been in condition, and the date stamp of Ezekiel 26 here. So this Ezekiel 26 prophecy is affecting Lebanon right now. You have a massive buildup of Syrian armies that are getting ready to go in to Lebanon to attack the Hezbollah groups that are Shia-backed Iranian groups. Turkey-Syrian groups are more Sunni-type nations. But you got to look at the feet of clay and iron, because these groups will finally coalesce together and go against Israel with 10 nations. So it's not like they won't join, but right now they haven't joined. And what's happening in Lebanon is going to affect what's getting ready to happen with Turkey coming into this game, possibly at the end of Ramadan, as they go through their holy month, and then possibly Erdogan would come out and say, "I want a global jihad. I'm going to start bringing my Turkish troops into this conflict." He would actually probably apply troops into Gaza, as well as he's also in the process of genociding the Kurds. At this moment in time, he's pushed them all the way east of the Euphrates, almost into Iran, and they're collapsing. So if Turkey would get into the game, the Kurds would be in terrible duress, as your Iranian government is already collapsing in front of you, as they're being bombed daily by Israeli and U.S. and other partners in the region. But not only do you have Hezbollah getting possibly attacked by the Syrian military, which are proxies of Turkey, the Free Syrian Army, the Syrian Army, Damascus have signed defensive pacts. I've shown you this in past videos, news articles where they've signed these pacts, and we're going to see now that Turkey's leading the Syrian army, but you have an additional issue that's happening in this area. So on the other side, Israel has ordered troops to seize new positions in Lebanon and create this buffer zone, similar to what Erdogan did in Syria and Iraq by creating a 30-mile buffer zone that allows them to catch missiles and things coming in, because they have the ability to track them, and they have to go over these buffer zones, and so hopefully they can shoot them down before they hit. And so now Israel's ordered troops to seize new positions in Lebanon. Interestingly, this happened on the blood moon event on Purim, going into this cycle we're in now. And I keep saying that I believe that the 3 blood moons you had in the last year, between Purim 2025, March 2025, and Purim March 2026, were your last 3 warnings. You're going into a supernatural cycle, and he has given you all the warnings before he brings Nebuchadnezzar into the room and actually unleashes Turkey on the Middle East, which is going to change the whole world as we move into a beast system by the end of this month, going into the beginning of April. So Israel has also moved in troops, and they're look, Erdogan looks at this as an expansion of the Israeli footprint, and that he's talked about how he thinks that Israel is going to expand, and actually expand so far that they'll encroach into Turkish territory. And this article was just in the last few days. Erdogan states that if Israel attacks us, we will occupy Cyprus, which is Kittim in the Bible, and half of the Aegean Sea. So look, they're concerned. Israel's never going to attack Turkey. But in their mind, because Israel's expanding, they're afraid that someday they're going to expand the footprint of God, which would include potentially parts of Turkey, if you look at the map of God's footprint. So it is a potential that Turkey's concerned, and he would then enter the conflict because Israel is expanding. And also you may have an issue because the Syrian-backed army through Turkey, are getting ready to go up against Hezbollah as Israel's moving up from the south. And so you could have a flashpoint and a conflict between Israel and Syrian Turkish-backed armies, which would then ignite into a wider conflict, locking the whole Middle East down. You think you got bad fuel prices now, and they're talking $120, $150 fuel? You could see $250 fuel, and you could see pump prices between $10 and $12 a gallon as you're going into massive stagflation and a hoarding of oil globally, because there's no way to transport it around this massive area called the Strait of Hormuz, the Red Sea, the Mediterranean Sea, the Black Sea, the Caspian Sea, and all these places that are being affected. All that freight, oil, and import exports are going to have to go around the whole thing. So who are they going to ship to? Whoever's the closest and whoever has the best price, which might just leave us out of a lot of this trade as we move forward, because you're a long way from this area, and they're not going to ship to you, especially since you created this war on Iran that's causing all this conflict. And if you get the Arabs in the room and they start shutting down production or embargoing us like in 1973, and I've talked about this, your pump prices are going to 4x up. Look, you went from 270 fuel before the war in Iran started a few weeks ago to now 370 almost. And they don't even realize that the war is going to take some time, or possibly it could be biblical, and this could really get ugly because no one's looking at Turkey entering this regional conflict. But this guy's saying, as an advisor for Erdogan, we're concerned about this, and we might have to preemptively do something. Well, I'll guarantee you that if Erdogan gets in this game, not only is he going to go down into Lebanon and help the Syrian forces against Israel, he's also going to collapse the Kurds down into Iran and potentially go against Iran. Because why? Iran is part of the original Ottoman footprint, and Erdogan is an ideologically driven nightmare in trying to rebuild his legacy as the new Ottoman emperor and the new Ottoman footprint of the past. So And also you have another issue because you have literally missiles now that are raining down on the Temple Mount. I've talked about how this could be a problem for Erdogan. If they're launching missiles from Iran into Israel and you see them blowing up and these cluster bombs going off and all this drones and different things, you're going to see stuff starting to hit around the Temple Mount. You have a couple issues here. Erdogan's not going to allow that to happen because you have two structures up there the Muslims care about. Also, you're at the season of the red heifer sacrifice. So last year, they actually did a trial run. The question that everybody's been asking is, did they actually use a red heifer that was not blemished and still now have the ashes from the original ceremony that they did on July 1st of 2025, and so they would not have to do a red heifer sacrifice this year, and so they could just perform the ceremony as we see Israel going under siege, and they would need to cleanse themselves, as I've talked about in Zechariah 13. They have to cleanse the nation before they go into hiding. If you go into Zechariah 14, it talks about how the Mount of Olives is split in half, slides from north to south, creating an exodus for the Jews, the remnant, the 1/3 that are removed for the 1260 days to go through into Jordan, down into Mount Sinai, where they were held when Moses took them out of Exodus in the original Exodus from Egypt. So this is extremely important. Do they have already, did they lie about the ashes? Because if the Muslims knew they had the red heifer sacrifice already performed and had the ashes, this would cause some real conflict, especially around the Temple Mount and between the Muslims and the Jews, thinking that they're going to fulfill prophecy by starting the third temple. This is extremely important. And so when you go in and you look at the dates of the red heifer sacrifice in the Bible, I talked about on the Sabbath in my last video about how on the Sabbath of March 7th, 2026, you go down here and it talks about how Numbers 19 reflects potentially this red heifer sacrifice, the process and the ordinances put in place to have the actual sacrifice ritual. Now, this isn't the ritual itself, it's the ordinances that allow them to do what they need to do to get the priests and everything ready so that they can perform it. Then they will actually present and have this prior to Passover and the death of our Lord Jesus on Nisan 14. When you go into March 28th of this year, which is a week and a half from now, it talks about how this is the great Sabbath. Okay, it talks about this massive Sabbath, the greatest Sabbath. It talks about how this is when they had the exodus of Egypt and how they were taken to the Red Sea, and then Pharaoh's armies came towards them and they were trying to figure out what to do, and then God parts the sea, allows them to have exodus to the Mount Sinai area to be hidden, or basically to be hidden, before they go into the 40 years of wandering around in the desert and then getting to the promised land that they had to endure, because the old generation of Moses and all of them perished before the new generation got to go into the actual promised land. None of the old generation actually got to see that. So this was also interesting because on this Sabbath of the 28th, we had on the 10th of Nisan, which would be 4 days before April 1st, so that's on March 27th, I believe, it's 26th, 27th, the firstborn of Egypt who occupied the senior positions in the priesthood and government fought a bloody battle with the Pharaoh's troops in an effort to secure and release the Israelites and prevent the plague of the firstborn. Remember, the fog came in and killed all the Egyptians' firstborn, but they were going to, because they went in and killed all the firstborn Israelis, and so then God put this plague on them to kill the firstborn of Egypt. And so this happened on the 10th of Nisan. Okay, so the 10th of Nisan, if you go look at the Jewish calendar, so you can see that Nisan 10 ends up on March 28th. That's interesting because Passover is on the 1st of April, Fool's Day of all things, Nisan 14. And that's interesting because that lines up when he died in the Bible on Wednesday and then rose 3 days later as first fruits on Passover, Nisan 17. So it lines up, and so we would see potentially an antichrist come up right around this area here, come in looking like Jesus, and then signing a treaty shortly after that, going into your 1260 days into the antichrist phase, into the end of the Shemitah cycle. You do realize that it tells you that he will come in with flatteries, that he will look like Jesus, that he will mimic him, he will mirror him. He will then deceive the nations in stating that the first one, they clearly tell you to avoid the first one because the first one that comes is not Jesus, it's Antichrist. And if you're a pre-rapture person, you may not understand what's happening because you're going to be here until the seventh trumpet, which is the Feast of Trumpets of September 9th, 10th of 2029, because you have to complete the Shemitah cycle. You're going to be here for tribulation. Go look at the terminology. It clearly states that you will be not removed till after tribulation occurs. So, should we be concerned about this date stamp of Nisan 1 of 2026 based on King Zedekiah of the past to Reuven Rivlin today? Yes, because I believe that Turkey's getting ready to come in here. You have another factor that we should look at really quick here. So when you go into the prophecy of Daniel 8, we're going to go through all these different prophecies. It just is easy to understand. The Kurds are the Medes, okay? Daniel 8 tells you when the Kurds or the Medes align with Persia or Iran in some fashion, shape, or form, Turkey would then come over and smash them. The Kurds have been genocided literally out of Turkey, Syria, and most of Iraq, east of the Euphrates, almost into Iran, where they're butting up against Kurdish nation groups that are in the western part of Iran, and so these groups are starting to literally cave into Iran. Then the Americans come in, and there's reports that state that if they get arming, if we arm them or give them, air support, that they would actually go in and fight against the Iranian regime because they're helping the Kurdish and Iranian people on the ground. Since the Iranian original government is gone and that leader is dead, and they believe that the new son that's the leader now has been hurt, mutilated, or not in a condition to be a leader, you have dysfunctionality over there. So the question is, has the government already collapsed? Are we seeing an alignment of the Kurds and the Iranians in the population of the people? But then it tells you, as Daniel 8 states, that Turkey would come across, attack them, crush both nations, and then be broken himself, possibly on a sixth seal event. And then that would then transform dead Erdogan, I know this is hard to believe because it's supernatural stuff, guys, into a supernatural resurrected Antichrist figure, as Isaiah 14 clearly tells you is going to happen when Satan is pulled from heaven, from Angel Michael standing on both sides of the bottomless pit, takes him from heaven, casts him to earth, gives him the key to the bottomless pit. He falls like a star, opens the bottomless pit, ejects this thing out of the abyss, impregnates him with supernatural powers, as well as the false prophet, which is probably the Pope, breaks the churches. We have this massive falling away from the church as we go into a beast system around the beginning of April of this year, into a beast system for 1260 days based on how the paradigm chart is set up in this Shemitah cycle that we're in at this moment in time. So look, all of your players are in place at this moment. The Kurds are collapsing into Iran. They have to align, because once Turkey gets in this game, they will be up against a wall. They will have nowhere to go but to Iran, and there's lots of Kurdish people in Iran, so these two groups are going to have to align and get along somehow, while Turkey's over there bombing them into the ground, because when Turkey unleashes, it says it's like a whirlwind. He just smashes them. They don't even have a freaking chance, and they're already destroyed through all the bombing and weakened through all the bombing of Israel and the United States and partners already. So it's not like they don't have the capacity to do anything. They're getting weakened all the time. So when Turkey comes in with a NATO force on the ground, because they already have everything there and they're lined up against Turkey, Turkey pumps a lot of fuels. Look, Turkey's very independent on fuel and import exports out of the Strait of Hormuz, okay? This is extremely important. That's down in here. These pipelines run between Iran and Turkey because they're an adjoining nation. Turkey owns everything around Iran. They own Syria, they own Iraq, they own Azerbaijan, they probably are in cahoots with Turkestan, they have Afghanistan, they've got the Yemen guys over here, you've got Put and Kush over here in Africa. They're advancing on Greece. They're also, I saw they were loading F-16 into Cyprus the other day. That ought to bring up the nation of Kittim, because Cyprus is Kittim, and it talks about how Kittim will actually go against Turkey in the future. All these pipelines are getting affected. If you have a terrorist attack in Turkey by the Kurds, which has happened in the past, that would then spur another issue with Turkey. If they hit the, actually hit oil infrastructure, pipelines, shut down more of Turkey's fuel, that would then hyperinflate their economy, because they don't have the ability to bring any of this material or oil into their country. They're very reliant on this passage through the Strait of Hormuz. If Turkey gets into this, you would see that since they owned Azerbaijan, they'd affect the Caspian Sea, they'd affect the Black Sea up here and the Mediterranean. They would boycott off this area, probably all the way down through even Egypt. You got Egypt down here. You got Israel. So Turkey would come down and boycott this whole region here. The U.S. ships have been pushed back out of here, so we're not even an effective force over here. So we have all kinds of different things going on here. And because they're an abutting nation, would Turkey then want to set up a barrier here like they did in Iraq and Syria? They set up a 30-mile buffer zone. So they could enter Iran as they're weakened and say, look, we're not going to tolerate missiles coming into our airspace, and we've seen 3 of them heading our way in just the last few days. So again, is he telling us when Turkey is getting ready to break out, either on Nisan 1 or shortly after that? Because he's talking about how he would break out on Nisan 1 in the 11th year of this king today, if you're looking from past to future, and it would affect Tyre or Tyre, Lebanon, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, the king from the north. From the north, Lebanon, from the north is Turkey. It's not Russia. Don't look at the Rosh thing. That means head or leader of Turkey. It has nothing to do with Russia. It's not a communist issue anyway. It's a Christian, Muslim, Jew thing anyway. And so he's going to bring all this judgment on Tyre or Tyrus, bring a lamentation against them approximately on or after Nisan 1, which ends the same day Ramadan ends, which is the holy month of the Muslim people. And so would then Erdogan come out after the holy Muslim month and say, I've had enough, I'm getting ready to advance into this conflict, and I'm bringing not only force down into Lebanon to help the Syrian government there take out Hezbollah, I'm going to put boots in the ground in Gaza, which would then nullify anything Israel would want to do because they know they can't take on Turkey. That would then allow Turkey to go down into Egypt and absorb all that area. But if you go into actually Daniel 11, it talks about how Egypt, the king of the south, will actually battle against the king of the north. He talks about the king of the north here. You should understand that he's talking about Nebuchadnezzar in this verse. He's talking about Erdogan coming down from Turkey into Lebanon, going down into Egypt, because all this area has to be absorbed. Then at the same time, you have Persia falling. Turkey will put boots on the ground. I've talked about this in the last video. The only one that has boots on the ground are two groups here, the Kurds and the Turkish people. We are putting some people over there, but that's to protect certain assets. It has nothing to do with invasion. Turkey would put boots on the ground, go in and complete the destruction of Iran. Then you would have your 10 nations formed. You would head towards Israel immediately, because Iran will not stand up against Turkish aggression. And I believe your nation would just collapse. That would then form all 10 nations in the Middle East that would then go against Israel. And you would see a beast system come in around the 1st of this next month. Possibly in the first week of that week of April 2026. So is this king reflecting, or this leader of today reflecting in the Bible what is getting ready to happen next to us? And it is lining up perfectly with what is going on in the world at this moment in time, based on what I've been trying to show you in the paradigm date stamps and how this works in this Shemitah 7-year cycle between September 2022 and September 2029. When you get to that date of the Feast of Trumpets of September 19th, because it's an evening going into the next day of 2029, you start the calendar year 2030. That would be your completion between 30 AD and 2030 AD, your 2,000-year gap when Jesus said that he would be here and come back. And so if you move it into the next Shemitah, and I don't see how that would work at this point with all the conflict going on in the world, how you would expand this thing out another 10.5 years into the end of the next Shemitah to get to another 7 trumpet at the end of the Shemitah in 2036. It just doesn't seem to add up, and that you're having all this happening right now. So probably it's going to affect us in this Shemitah cycle, which ends up at the end of September of 2029. So I wanted to bring this to your attention. Is Ezekiel 26:1 actually reflecting events today? Does this date stamp tell us that Turkey's getting ready to come in right after Ramadan, right on the 1st of Nisan? He'll go into Lebanon, but he'll expand also into Gaza and also towards Iran, as he's literally forcing the Kurds to collapse into that country. And this guy that just got elected is in against a total wall, because he's collapsing into Iran. He can't do anything about it. This guy just got elected. Erdogan stated in May of 2024, before this guy got elected, he would not allow a Kurdish nation to stand. They would not get governance over their nation. They would not have a regional capital. They would not exist as a nation, because he believes they're terrorists. And that's the reason he's been genociding them since 1984. That's how long this has been going on. This guy's been in the process of converting, transforming the whole Middle East and Africa and Cyprus and the Iranian areas around Azerbaijan and Afghanistan since he came in 2003. And he stated at the very beginning of his term when he first came in 23 years ago, he was going to rebuild the Ottoman Empire nightmare for all of us to enjoy. So I think he's done a really good job of it, and I don't know how much we're enjoying it though. So just realize that this is getting ready to break on you. So I wanted to bring this to your attention because I had made a mistake in the date stamps. I only had it as the 10th year on that prophecy. And Ezekiel clearly tells you here it is the 11th year. So when you go back and you look at that set of kings, that king Zedekiah, how he reflects in exactly the position and time today. 4 of these guys do this with different verses throughout the Bible. Is God telling us that between July 24th of 2025 and July 24th of 2026 in Nisan 1, which would be March 18th, 19th of 2026, we would see King Nebuchadnezzar start to come into this conflict? Because he is clearly telling you this is a judgment against Tyre, that it will be like the top of a rock that's been cleansed completely off. There won't be anything left of it except some dust. That's how much destruction is getting ready to come up on Tyre. Erdogan is not going to be a nice leader to take over the Middle East. He's going to be ruthless. He's a ruthless man. He's a dictator. You have to understand what he is. And he's going to take Tyre on. King of Babylon, the king of the north, is going to bring everything against them. He's going to destroy them. He's going to take their riches, take spoils. He's going to destroy them. It's going to affect the islands around him called Kittim and different things like Cyprus. All this is going to be affected, especially when you get stroked by a 6th seal event that decimates 10 full nations by the end of this month. So get ready, guys. I'm telling you, things are getting ready to break. I'm sorry I got this date stamp wrong. I believe most, if not all, of the other ones are right. I've looked at them, I don't know how many times, but they were moving forward into future, not already something that I thought had already passed. And when I realized that this is actually a Nisan 2026 prophecy and not a Nisan 1 2025 prophecy based on the king, I realized I had to come out and notify you that we might be in a potential cycle of destruction with a 6th seal event before the end of the month, going into a beast system into the first week of April. And once I get the ability to adjust the charts and different things like that, I will then represent the chart and a video that gives you the breakdown of how that all works, and I'll probably put a text file together for you so it's easier for you to follow. Get your oil in your lamps. If you have not got your things now to get ready for the next 3.5 years and you're going to be pre-raptured, you know what? If you're going to be pre-raptured, collect the stuff. And if you're not going to be here, it won't matter to you. Somebody else can use it. But if you're wrong and you're going to be here, then you haven't been prepared. You don't have your oil in your lamp, and you're going to be left in a terrible condition as this world breaks down in the next 3.5 years. Look, only a remnant of the world survives from each and every country. He clearly tells you in Ezekiel 5:12, 1/3 will die by famines, plagues, disease, death, by starvation and things like that. 1/3 will die by the sword, as we're watching this happened right now in Ezekiel 26. He's talking about bringing the sword against the daughters of Lebanon, and how he's going to bring this massive army that overflows like an ocean over the top of them, like a big wave. It's just going to destroy everything. Same thing will happen to Iran because it's already weakened. Same thing will happen down in Gaza because Hamas already on Turkey's side. They have put in Kush or Sudan and Ethiopia on the other side. Turkey owns them. Egypt has no ability to fight this massive army that's getting ready to take over the whole Middle East. So they will be neutral, but they will be under duress. When Nebuchadnezzar came down in history, he just walked through Israel and went down into Egypt, and they just said, hey, we're not fighting you, man. We're just not going to fight you. Now, they will once Antichrist rises and they reform and then they regroup, and then they'll end up going against Antichrist as we move forward in the next 3.5 years. But if this paradigm works the way I think it has and has been working in the last 3.5 years, you will see something crazy happen before the end of this month. Probably Turkey getting in this room and some crazy events in the Middle East that might be actually supernatural in effect, because you've got a sixth seal, a massive earthquake, a darkening of stars and moon and sun, stars falling from heaven onto what? Nations that have gone against his people, heaven rolling up like a scroll and moving. Where? Maybe above us? You go look at it. Sixth seal is an interesting seal. Then you go into a seventh seal, silence for a half an hour, about 7 days. I'm going to put all this down in the chart. Then you go into what we call the selection of the 144,000 in that period of time, a preparation for Satan being thrown out of heaven to earth, given the key to the bottomless pit, 4 trumpets devastating a third of the planet, probably the communist areas, Pacific area regions, taking you to a bottomless pit, a release of scorpions for 5 months to sting the men without the seal of God. You also have, once that occurs, and a rising of the Antichrist and the false prophet on the 6th trumpet. Revelation 13 exposes all this and how the 2 beasts rise. Guess what? In the 6th trumpet, it talks about the 200 million radical Muslims that will be released upon the earth to either radicalize you into Sharia law or that religion, or kill you because you won't join into their madness. So that's extremely important that you understand. And if you know where you are in time, when this first guy comes down, you'll realize he's Antichrist, whether you're raptured or not. That's extremely important. And the other thing that's extremely important that I must stress to you, as this breaks down through the end of the month into a beast system going into the first part of April here, and you watch the Middle East, the economies and everything collapse globally, you're going into a beast system. And what does God tell you? You cannot take the mark of the beast. It is forbidden. You will lose your soul forever. It tells you something stark in Revelation 20 that you need to understand. This is so important. Other than you need to believe in the Son, Jesus, the Son of God, the true Son. He is real. He is the Son of God. You need to believe it. The Jews don't. That's why a third of them are only going to be rescued from this, because the rest of them don't believe in the Son of God, of Jesus. But he tells you this. And he sat upon them. The judgment was given unto them. And I saw the souls of them that had been beheaded for the witness of Jesus, the probably the elect, and the people that martyred themselves and did not fall into the beast system trap. And for the word of God, and which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, neither received the mark upon their foreheads or their hands, and they lived and reigned with Christ for 1,000 years. He's telling you right now, if you take that mark, if you join that beast system, if you are in it for the 3.5 years that Antichrist is on the ground being controlled by Satan, you will lose your soul forever. Forever. So you need to tell your people, your networks, what's going on out here, because you're going to lose your loved ones, your friends, your family, your co-workers, your whoever you know, strangers around you that have never seen biblical prophecy applied or been lied to the churches that they're going to be pre-raptured and they're not going to have to deal with this and it's only for the Jews or whoever. You need to go in and look at this judgment against the population of the planet, which are the seals, trumpets, and hopefully you're not here for the bowls, okay? Because the bowls are the wrath of God, and we're not appointed for the wrath of God, okay? Which is in Revelation 15 and 16. It's extremely important that you understand these things. Look, you're getting ready to go into a massively supernatural effect. It's going to compress, expand, and amplify at a rate that no one is ready for. This is supernatural. He's going to change it overnight. Your third blood moon on Purim on March 3rd was your last warning. If you actually go in and look at that prophecy and date stamp that I have on February 11th of 2026, Zechariah sees a man on a red horse, second seal, standing in the myrtle trees, reflecting the nation of Israel and Jerusalem, ready to go into judgment in Zechariah 1 verse 7 and 8. So he's warning them in February of this year based on the king on that verse in Zechariah 1 verse 7 and 8 that he's getting ready to go against judgment. Now you're in March, you're getting ready to watch Turkey walk into this room and take on Israel as they're expanding into Lebanon from the north or from the south into Lebanon, into the southern part of Lebanon, as Syrian forces are coming in from the east to the west, as well as possibly Turkey would come down through the north, through Lebanon, through that air base up there, all the way down through Beirut, down into Tyre, Lebanon, for that siege of Tyre, Lebanon that I was talking about. And like I say, this could expand out for a few months. Turkey could load armies and military assets through the Mediterranean Sea into Palestine, into Palestine, because he already has assets down in there to help the Palestinian people, and he controls the Hamas through a proxy. So that is a potential down there for him to do that and slip under the radar as he did in October. Look, nobody caught Erdogan moving assets down into Lebanon in October of last year, and I talked about how the Battle of Gaza would happen or start in October of last year, and that would radiate into a war against Turkey and Lebanon, or Turkey and Egypt, because that's what happened in the Battle of Gaza in history. Israeli forces could not deal with the amount of carnage that was happening to them, and they caved into Turkey to allow them to go down and deal with Egypt. Now I just noticed and I'll stop because this is going to be an hour-long video, that Israel had just in the last 12 to 24 hours opened up that corridor between Egypt and Palestine to allow a few people through and to allow some aid up through there. But Erdogan's been complaining because very few people or supplies are getting through that corridor. And if you go back in the history of Egypt and Israel, you'll understand that if you go into the Bible, Egypt has a massive judgment against them as they move forward. To the point, actually, on the paradigm, they cease as a nation, their leader is destroyed in the next 3.5 years, and the whole thing collapses. And actually, if you go into the paradigm date stamp, I actually have another paradigm stamp down here, which on March 25th, so you're here within a week of 2026, Egypt is broken and the peoples are scattered throughout the nations in Ezekiel 30 verse 19 through 26, as you watch a sixth seal potentially pop in or around this period of time, possibly even around the 28th on that great Sabbath event. So that, like I say, I'm going to adjust these dates just a little bit, but the paradigm stamps are the paradigm stamps. That is a paradigm date stamp, so that one can't be changed because of the king and the date that he gives us. So March 25th of 2026, Egypt could be starting to collapse as a nation, maybe being hit by rockets, different things like that. You got the global collapse of oil and different things like that. Turkey could get in the game. That would then effectively change the Gaza situation down there. And so you got all these different things happening, but just realize you have another date stamp here that also could affect you as we move into March 25th into a beast system around the end of the month of March. That may adjust a little bit because I found a couple new things, but these charts are only adjusting by a few days. They're not adjusting like years, months, things like that. I mean, I'm tweaking them at days now, not because they have to fit in a compression zone. You've got a B system that has to come in for 3.5 years around March 30th or the first week of April, and then that radiates you to the Feast of Trumpets 2029, which would be a seventh trumpet event and a rapture event based on the charting that I have out here. So you can see when abomination occurs, that would be the same. You have the Feast of Trumpets on September 10th, 11th, 2029. That would be the same. None of this is going to change. Most of these dates as you move forward aren't going to change. I've double checked and triple checked these dates so much. But like I say, when we go back to this date of March of 25, it already passed and I hadn't gone back to look at it. I just hadn't gone back to look at it. But it's stating here that Ezekiel, in the 11th year of that king, which is actually 26, would start to occur on Nisan 1. That is going from Wednesday into Thursday of this week, this month. So on that note, find the Son of God, find Jesus, understand He's the only open door, He's the only way through this, but He clearly tells you He is going to try you through fire, refine you, make you decide whether you want to follow man's ways or His ways. Come back to God, purify yourself, not get in the beast system, and figure out how to survive this for the next 3.5 years. And most of us, as it states, will not survive that task. Very few of us will make it to the end of this story. And then you'll be judged once you get into the millennium. The believers will be removed and taken into the millennial, and then after the millennial you have the white throne judgment, and all the rest of the non-believers would be judged going into the eternity. Whether they're cast in the lake of fire or not, that's up to them based on their works at that moment in time. You will be based on your works as well as your belief in the Lord Jesus and probably what you've done at this moment in time, because you're aware you should be doing what? The Great Commission. The Great Commission, folks, is trying to keep people from going into the beast system and losing their souls forever, like I just explained to you just a few minutes ago. So get ready. I believe this is on. I believe the paradigm chart is close. It will happen. Turkey will get in this game within a few days, within a couple weeks at the latest. The prophecy says it starts on Nisan 1, which is March 18th. So let's see what happens as we move forward. Will it happen on that very specific date? We could see Turkey come out right after Ramadan and say, I've had enough of this. I'm going to get in the game. I'm done messing with this. You could see a clash between Hezbollah, Israel, and Syrian forces, which could then draw him down into that, as well as you could see something in his country or affecting Iran and the Kurds on the other side, or Iran launching missiles against Israel, hitting around the Temple Mount, that would also then force him to come into this, because he's not going to allow that to happen. He's also not going to allow the Kurds to become a nation. If we start to fortify them, arm them, use them to take out the Iranian government, he's not going to agree to that, because he doesn't want them part of that group or system. And so there's a lot of reasons Erdogan would or possibly could be brought into this, pipelines hit or whatever. So get your oil ready, get ready for this one. It's going to get ugly. God bless. Be safe out there and do what you need to do as everything collapses.